So where to apply? That's a good segue. Many students today would be a professional if they had only followed the advice of an advisor. Right? Number one, schools are graded in terms of the application process. So if you have a 3.8 from USF, it's certainly not equivalent to a 3.8 from Emory, or from Johns Hopkins, or from Harvard. That's just a fact of life. All of these schools use an equation, and part of the equation that they actually give a score to the school that you attended. So, what school should you apply to? Number one, schools that have very similar profiles that you have. So if you have a 3.5 GPA, and you're applying to schools that have a mean of about 3.8, 3.9, your chances are very, very remote. To be strategic means that if you apply to 10 schools, at least 8 of those schools should be at the level in terms of your academic credentials. And you need to know and to understand that. We look at your overall GPA and we look at your science GPA. When students come to my office, they say, well, what's your science GPA? 9 out of 10 have no idea what the science GPA is. And that's what the schools all look at, to begin to determine if you're going to be competitive. Science GPA consists of biology, chemistry, math, and physics. So just as you know your overall GPA, you need to know your science GPA. That gives you a sense of how competitive you're going to be. So where should you apply to? As many schools as you want to, but you've got to be very strategic. Why should they accept you? The question for the schools is, will you be a good fit for that particular school? Is the school very research oriented? If you've done very little research, then the probability of fitting to that school is very remote. Okay. So again, read the mission statement of every school that you plan to apply to, see what they're asking for, see the niche for that particular school, and then ask yourself, do I fit into that school? Okay. And of course, if you go for your interview, you should know everything about that school that you need to know. You have to sell yourself to the interview committee, saying this is where I really want to be, I can be very successful. So that's very important. So application basics. The application, as I said, says a lot about you. Every year when I do the annual report, I look at students who have some very high credentials, very high GPAs, very high MCAT or DAT scores. And guess what? They got no interviews. They weren't invited anywhere. And the question is, what really happened? Why did schools ignore this particular person? Many times it's the way that the application was written. So for example, if they request 5,000 characters and you only write 2,000, what impression are you given? Not paying attention to detail. And once they begin to ask questions about you, you're bypassed because there's somebody behind you who has a very complete application. And that's really the key issue about this. Your application must be complete. What do I mean by complete? That means every question or every box that's there has got to be responded to. With either a yes, a no, not applicable, or the information put in. You leave nothing out. Nothing should be left out in terms of your response. That's a complete application. If your application is incomplete, as I said, the person behind you has a complete application, they can be evaluated and not you. So every part needs to be done. And so we talk about different issues, schools attended, your biographic information, your coursework. We're going to talk about those different aspects today. That's really the essence of this application itself. So, all applications, whether PA, PD, optometry, begin with knowing who you are. Okay? Your correct name, your legal name, your alternate names. Again, the school ID number, that sometimes people tend to forget that. You put that in the application, you say your date of birth, place of birth, and gender. it must be complete again. Every box must be filled out. Every question asked must be responded to. It is important. You shouldn't leave anything out at all. Okay, so schools attended. If you did dual enrollment, that school needs to be included. If you're in high school and took classes, even if it's on your high school transcript, you can send your high school transcript to any portal. It has to be from a college. And everything has got to be included. You know, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, you could maybe escape with excluding some things, but not today, because everything is electronic. And if they find you out, no matter where you are, about to graduate, and we've had people who've been on the verge of graduating, and they found out that they attended schools that didn't list on the application. And guess what? After 4 years in professional school, they were dismissed. Okay. You read about stories about people today who 20 years ago claimed they had a degree, and now they've been found out. You don't take any chances. You've got to be accurate. So every school that you attend, you need to request from them a transcript. But before you begin to fill out your application, make sure that you have an unofficial copy from the school. Because whatever you write on your application has got to be synchronized with what's on your transcript. If it's not, then that begins to create some kind of confusion. So it's very important that every school that you've been to, that you actually begin to match those issues. A very important aspect is called institutional action. Sometimes, as students, we get into trouble. It could be an ethical issue, it could be an academic issue, and you've been referred to students' rights and conduct. Some action has been taken against you. Or it might be in the outside world. It might be a misdemeanor. Whatever it is, if you have any questions, talk to your advisor about it. But if some action has been taken against you, it needs to be addressed. Okay. Very interesting. Lauren and I just came a couple of weeks ago from New Orleans, where there was a conference for professional advisors. And FAMCAS is a very interesting aspect. When you write your personal statement to FAMCAS, so if you're going to be a pharmacy applicant, guess what they do? Imagine the idea? Your personal statement that's written in your application to FAMCAS, they take it out and they send to Turnitin. What's Turnitin? What is it about Turnitin? To see if it's been plagiarized. Okay. They take no matter what school they're applying to, before they're going to send it to that school, they take your personal statement and run it through Turnitin. And if it's very high in terms of, score, they make a report to every school that you apply to and every other school in FAMCAS. Is it worth it? No. And we'll talk about the essay later on. They're just so very careful these days. So again, if you're asked, and there's always a question asked about, has any action been taken against you, you need to explain. If you want to know how to write it, you can come to one of us, we'll give you some guidelines, but it has to be addressed. That's very, very important. And again, biography, different aspects about your residence, your ethnicity, language, disadvantaged status. That's a very important aspect about it too. Schools are looking for persons who, as they call it, the journey covered. All of us don't have all the benefits of life as some other people do. Okay, so it could be disadvantaged from an economic perspective, from a financial perspective, from an educational perspective, from an underserved perspective. Whatever it is, again, if you think you're disadvantaged, talk to one of us and we can help you about it. So all these issues, also about your parents and dependents and siblings. Sometimes I get applications that really don't address those issues. You need to put in everything that you're asked. If you get anything from this, workshop today. Every box, every question has got to be responded to. There should be no outbreak. Okay, this time we turn over to Lauren.